Thank you for tuning in to another edition of the All Cardinals podcast. My name is Donnie and Druin, joined every week by my main man, Andrew Harbaugh. Andrew, we are 1 week removed from the 2023 NFL Scouting Combine. A lot of info to digest, a lot of things to sort through before we really get into it. How are you?
I'm doing good. Got 6 inches of snow in the forecast for tomorrow, so getting ready for that. And I'm sure you're getting ready for the same thing in Arizona.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. A wise man, a.k.a. Former ASU, now current Arizona Cardinals assistant defensive coach, Rob Rodriguez, said, quote, "You can't shovel sunshine." And I think since I moved out here from the East Coast, I've really lived by that. And you know what, man? Like wearing shorts and a t-shirt on Christmas, I really can't complain.
To be fair, I wear shorts year round. So
Oh, you're one of those guys.
I am one of those guys. Like I tell my wife there's a senator who's always in the news anymore, from Pennsylvania, John Fetterman. He is the epitome of Pennsylvania, where it's long sleeve shirt or a hoodie with shorts, socks, and flip flops year round. Wears a suit when he meets the president or he's in Congress. Other than that, that's what he's wearing. So he is Pennsylvania man, and I am also a Pennsylvania man. So not all of us can just abandon our roots.
Oh, okay. I see how it is. But I mean, you know what? I'm not even mad. I'm not even mad. Thanksgiving, Christmas, I feel like year round, it's great. The 120-degree weather isn't ideal, but if I have to put up with that for like 3 months out of the 12-month calendar year, it is what it is. But like I mentioned a little bit earlier in the prelude, we are a week removed from the NFL Scouting Combine. A lot of great stories, a lot of risers, some fallers there in the Combine. Briefly talked about this with Richie on Tuesday's episode, where me and him kind of basically just pounded the table for the Cardinals stick to the number 3 pick in draft, Will Anderson. But that's a completely different topic than today. Today we're talking Jalen Carter. Now, Andrew, before I ask you your just general thoughts on Jalen Carter, what happened last week, let me paint a picture for you. I and 40 other people are at the podium that Jalen Carter is supposed to speak at. 10 minutes before he speaks, we all get the tweet notification that says, "Hey, Jalen Carter isn't going to be here because that man has arrest warrants out issued for his name in the state of Georgia." So that spawns this crazy hysteria there at the Combine. Obviously, he ends up not speaking, flies to Georgia, gets booked and out after posting a $4,000 bond in like 10 to 15 minutes. It was a great speed run by him. Back to Indianapolis to complete the interviews with the teams and stuff. We don't really know a whole lot more than that. It was weird. He was at like the drills at the Combine on the sideline supporting his guys.
Yes.
I thought that was a little bit weird, but to each their own. I guess to start this episode out, like, what are your general thoughts of what happened with Jalen Carter? If you're a GM, are you taking this very seriously? Are you kind of just brushing it to the side? Like, take me through your thought process.
Obviously, like, you've heard things in Indy. I've heard things through different people. And it's a very serious situation. And it's one you don't want to gloss over, because there is, if what happened, there's loss of life involved, and not directly through him, but just in the events that unfolded. And it affected a program, it affected a team that's very close, coming off 2 national championships, close coaching staff. Like, there's not a lot of turnover at Georgia. So that's tough, first and foremost, from the personal and the football perspective that happened. Now, again, it's one of those things that every couple months you get a reminder, this is still a business at the end of the day. And Jalen Carter, for a team, I gave the example of he might fall, he might not. If he does, I think it's going to be another situation similar to what Warren Sapp had during his draft scenario, or a more recent comparison be Laramie Tunsil. Now, albeit both of those were involving extracurricular activities of the drug side, which both of those, I want to say they were both marijuana, which that's a different discussion on how serious, not serious it is, and I'm not here for it. But the point is, they were both drug related, did not have as serious of circumstances surrounding it. But that being said, I mean, there's examples across the league of, if you're a good football player and if you're the best player in the draft, obviously you're going to go somewhere. I don't think he's going to fall too far. I think the minute he slips, if he slips, I think the minute he slips past Arizona, if Arizona doesn't take him, I think that's when Indianapolis, if they haven't traded back, like that's the other thing too. Chicago was maybe going to get projected to have him anyway. They may end up with him. I think if someone else trades with it, like there's a whole bunch of scenarios and we'll talk about them, but I don't think he's going to have to wait long like Laramie Tunsil did or Warren Sapp did. Like I believe Warren Sapp got outside the top 10 and obviously he had a Hall of Fame career, won Super Bowl with Tampa Bay. So, and Laramie Tunsil is now one of the best tackles in football, highly paid, worked out fine. So I think the same thing's going to happen with Carter. I think it's going to be something that you'll remember because you were waiting at that podium. Sure and it'll be something that we discuss, like if you look at his legacy and stuff like that. But I mean, once he gets on the field and starts performing somewhere, I think it's going to be none of this happened, unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on which
and
side.
That's how it goes in the NFL, right? I mean, almost anything you do off the field, if you show up on Sundays, people tend to forget about it. That's kind of just it is what it is at that point. I remember the week prior to the combine, I believe it was Todd McShay had pointed to some character concerns around Carter, and he got a lot of flack for that. He had a lot of flack for it, and those turned out to be true. And I was talking with you before the show that there was one team, at least in the top 10, who I found out in Indy, completely took him off the board the week before the combine because they knew what was coming. They knew what was about to surface. I did think the timing of it was a little bit interesting. Now, granted, the police department, the local one, did issue warrants out for his arrest. And I don't think the police are necessarily out to get Jalen Carter in any which way.
I mean, I think they timed that timing up on purpose. I'm not saying the police did that to like, haha, we're gonna stick it to you. I mean, right. I think to bring attention to a case, I get that.
And I think that's the thing both of us are learning. We're still fairly young in our media careers, is there's an agenda to everything. Every report, every rumor, everything you see, there's an agenda behind it. Now, granted, I don't know what the motive would be behind that. I think you bring a very good point that, at very minimum, that brought light to a case that not many had necessarily thought twice about previously in the past. But nonetheless, Jalen Carter is going to find himself drafted very likely in the top 10, if not the top 5 at some point, come late April in the NFL draft. I guess the ultimate question is, if you're the Arizona Cardinals, and this has been a point brought up by a few different people, if you're general manager Monty Ossenfort, you are, your very first pick, it's a top 3 pick. This pick has the potential to help change the tide of your franchise. Are you going to roll the dice on a guy like Jalen Carter?
I think I think I would stay away. And I think not because I doubt Carter or not because I don't think he could be a great Cardinal or an all-time great. It comes to one of those scenarios, and this is something I've learned from someone along the way with scouting, and if you're doing mocks and just player evaluations. Are you going to be okay passing over someone? You have to be okay playing against them. And now, as we talked before, and we'll get into, there is a spot where playing against him could be a real possibility. But I think you need to look at it from, this is going to be a whole new locker room, as we've pounded home 30 free agents. And you don't necessarily want a whole bunch of new faces or the same faces. And you have someone coming in that potentially is linked to what he is linked to. And we have walked around it and everything. Like, if you want to look it up, you can look it up. It's easy to find. But it affects a team and it affects a locker room. And I think throwing somebody into that, I just wouldn't do. I think if you're going to take a chance on him, you got to be a seasoned coach, which you don't have. And you have to have a seasoned front office, which you don't have. Mm-hmm. So there's other teams, one being in the division, that I think he's going to end up at, that fits that criteria because you have a longer leash. You have bigger money contracts and just more patience around because you potentially could have won prior. Whereas Arizona's really just picking up the pieces. Like, this is a rebuild. And I don't know if you want, as you put it, literally the first pick of your tenure to be the guy that got an arrest warrant issued the day he was supposed to address media at the combine.
Yeah.
So, and again, I don't know the details. I'm not holding it against Carter. I'm just looking at it from an analyst standpoint. I just wouldn't take the risk.
And I think you bring up a lot of valid points with that. Circling back, though, because you see how talented he can be, and you see the way he can just change games along the defensive interior. I mean, I'll throw this out there for you. This probably is a dumb question, but I'm going to ask it anyway because it's what I'm great at. Do you think if a guy like J.J. Watt was there, you would feel a little more comfortable taking him, knowing that J.J. would kind of be there to, at minimum, police him and hopefully take him under his wing?
So I love J.J. Watt, the player, the person. If I'm J.J. Watt and say, like, I'm assuming if he would have came back next year would have been his last year, I'm sure he would have said, like, look, this is probably going to be my last year. I don't want to babysit this kid, potentially. But Watt's also a good enough person. He could be like, you know what? My lasting impact on this team can be, I'm going to make sure this kid does all right. So, I mean, it could go either way. I think it could weigh to where the front office and the coaching staff are going to be like, hey, look, he's going to get a year under you, and we would love you to make him a pro, basically. And like you've seen from Watt with the Hard Knocks with the Cardinals, Hard Knocks with the Texans, he's the consummate pro. Right. So I think that could make an impact. That's not a dumb question because, like I said, I just made an argument for and against it, but I would probably lean that Watt probably might not be so thrilled about it, but I could see the team being like, hey, do us a favor on your way out the door type of thing.
So when me and Richie on Tuesday talked about you don't want to be remembered as the guy who passed up on Will Anderson if he's there at 3, I think a similar argument could be made for Jalen Carter. You don't want to be the team that passed up on Jalen Carter, and let's say he goes to a team within the division that's also picking in the top 5, wink, wink. Yep. And you're going to have to see him twice a year, and he's just going to wreck every part of your offensive game plan up front. Does that play a factor into it at all? I mean, these are all like different things the Cardinals have to weigh on top of just like the player evaluation itself, right?
Yeah, I mean, but you also don't want to be drafting just to take people away from other people. Like that's something you do at the end of a fantasy draft when you've had a quarterback, nobody else has a quarterback, so you're going to take an extra one just to be that guy.
Yeah.
But no, like it is tough. And like we said, it used him at Seattle is who I think he ends up at. I think Seattle could turn him into an all-pro. Like I said before the show, we were looking at the order. Just to jump ahead here, I'm sure I'm messing up your show notes here.
No, we're actually about to get right into it. So
we're rolling into it. So I think 5 is where he ends up because you have a front office that's won a Super Bowl. You have a head coach that's won a Super Bowl. You have a team that just got Geno Smith figured out. You have the extra picks from the Russell Wilson trade. You have Kenneth, you've been hitting on picks. And I love John Schneider. He's one of my favorite GMs in the entire league, to be honest. I love how he got there. I love the philosophy of how he drafts and everything. I'm not going to gush over it anymore. But the point is, he just, Jalen Carter screams a Seahawk because they took a chance on Frank Clark, who, not comparing situations, but had a much more graphically detailed situation coming out of Michigan. And again, the whole Carter thing. But the point is, he's not afraid to take chances on guys with character issues. They had the other one we were talking about before, and I still can't remember. There was another player that was supposed to be a high draft pick, had an ATV or or Bobcat accident, some type of sporting vehicle accident. They took a chance on him. It didn't work out. So there's obviously hits and misses there. But I think Carter, like, physically is fine, obviously. I think mentally he's going to be a pro. And I think Pete Carroll on that defense, I think, could really scheme him well and get him in positions that, like, he could be an all-pro, I think, on that team. That being said, as you pointed out, play Seattle twice a year. So that's the problem you run into, where it's like, do I inject this and roll the dice, or do I let him go to Seattle potentially and potentially wreak havoc for 2 games out of the season? So it's tough. But again, I think you got to look bigger picture if you're Arizona.
No, absolutely. So we talked about potentially passing on Carter at pick number 3. Let's say the Cardinals trade down, because I feel like it is trending towards them wanting to move back.
Agreed.
As it stands right now. Let's say, I mean, dude, I could see 7, 8, or 9 moving up to pick number 3 if they really want to. I mean, dude, let's say for fun, we'll split the difference. We'll put Arizona at number 8. And for whatever reason, Jalen Carter is still there. Do you feel like obligated to take him that far down into the order?
I think if he's there at 8, I would roll the dice.
Granted, I don't think that'll happen, but, like, I mean,
agreed. I don't think it'll happen either. But I mean, I could see it where at 8 you could just be like, you know what, we're going to take BPA here. And if it's not Jalen Carter, you can go another direction. But I think no matter what, at 8 it's BPA. And if it is Jalen Carter, I think you roll the dice there at that point, because that's a reasonable risk reward type scenario. Because I mean, after that, Carolina, I don't think. They just drafted Derek Brown a couple years ago in the first round. They've really focused on defense under Matt Rule and their drafts there. I don't think Philadelphia takes them because they're pretty well loaded at defensive line. I think the next place they would be is Tennessee. So depending on how far back Arizona trades, I think Tennessee would be the only other place that might take them. But still, I don't know about that.
Philly's set to lose Javon Hargrave and Fletcher Cox, aren't they? To free agency.
Javon Hargrave, I know. I thought Fletcher Cox was still.
Dude, pairing him with Hargrave in Philadelphia would just be absolutely nuts if they're able to re-sign him.
Oh, maybe Fletcher Cox is going to be a free agent. I know.
So,
it says 2023. Sorry, go ahead.
No, you're good. So I feel like as of right now, it looks
Cox
like
is
the
under
most.
contract.
Okay. The most realistic option for the Cardinals is they probably trade down somewhere between that, like, 7 to 9 range. Carter likely isn't going to be there, right? We're assuming Will Anderson has gone off the board too. So you trade down, the top 2 defensive prospects are off the board. Where do you go? Because I know you just did a mock draft feature on allcardinals.com. Go and check that out now. Where, I mean, there's still a lot of greatly talented players you can still get on the second half of the top 10.
Yeah, and like if you think about it, just like I said, how BPA, I think BPA at that point could be a corner, and that's what in my mock I had them trading back with Las Vegas. I think that's the sweet spot. 7 or 8 is where they end up, honestly. I think at that point, the BPA is going to probably be all the edge talent's going to probably be gone. Like Tyree Wilson probably won't be there because it seems like coming out of the combine, his stock has skyrocketed. Will Anderson, I can't imagine is going to make it that long, just like Carter's. So there's your like top 3 defensive players all gone. So that leaves you really with the corners. So you get to choose really between Devon Witherspoon, who I think is so much fun to watch. Like, I'm not a big fan of watching corner tape, but Devon Witherspoon is a lot of fun. And another person who's a lot of fun and I like more is Christian Gonzalez, and he tested very, very well at the combine as well. Christian Gonzalez is a big corner, plays big length for arms, transferred to Oregon last year after being at Colorado, was a bright spot on the Buffaloes there, and then came to Oregon and really thrived. First time he got my attention, I can still picture it, the Georgia game, week 1. They threw a screen out to Kenny McIntosh. It was at like the 5-yard line, and he had a one-on-one with him. And literally, it was the most sound tackle I've ever seen from a corner. Like, literally, it was like a linebacker type. Set your feet, square up. I'm not going to bite one way or the other. Just so technically sound with his tackling on top of his ball tracking skills. I think that'd be great, even if, and I put it in the mock, even if you sign Byron Murphy back with Marco Wilson being there. This is a passing league still. You need to have corners because there's going to be teams that are 3-4 wide receivers deep. Christian Gonzalez also forces turnovers. So I think corner would be the route I would go there. And then at that point, you just got to hope whoever you have on the edge and the line at that point can get coverage sacks versus pressure turnovers, as we've talked in the past. So as long as one of those groups gets shored up, like in bulk with some talent, whether it be the DBs or the defensive line, you're going to be able to create pressure and turnovers one way or the other. And that's what you're going to end up doing with Kyler Murray as your quarterback. You want to give him more chances, just like you want a pitcher to have extra runs to kind of work with and not have in the back of their mind. Same thing. If you got a defense forcing turnovers, that's better. And I think you do that at the corner position right now if you trade back in your Arizona.
And well, let's not forget too, there's 7 rounds to the NFL draft, right? I mean, like the first round, obviously carries a lot of weight, but I mean, there's still 6 other rounds for you to really go and find some impact players. I think just through reading your mock drafts, there's a handful of guys Cardinals can still very well grab on day 2 or possibly even day 3 that can be very, very strong contributors. Whether that be in the corner class, whether that be at defensive tackle or edge rusher. I'll give you this. So let's say Zach Allen leaves, JJ Watt retires, right? You really don't have a whole lot of getting to the quarterback there in your front 7 right now. I mean, if you trade back like that, do you try to find a guy like maybe like Breesy out of Clemson? Maybe the Pitt defensive tackle is escaping my head right now.
Yeah. At 8 or 9, maybe. Like, honestly, if you're Arizona, it's very rare for a team to trade back twice, but like kind of seeing how the board falls, like say those are your best options at 8 or 9, I would try to find somebody else who wants to jump in there. Like, there's got to be something. Like, say Anthony Richardson's still on the board and you have 8 or 9, I'd be like calling Washington at 16 and be like, hey, Richardson's here, Carolina's next, potentially. Do you want him? Yada, yada, yada. Same with Houston potentially wanting to get back into the top 10 for some added talent. Like falling back there, I would be more comfortable with taking a guy like Breesy. Keon White out of Georgia Tech, who I love, has all the intangibles in the world, but he's a big building block. Lucas Van Ness is another one out of Iowa. He's another project guy. So that's the thing where the guarantees are really, it seems like anymore, those top 3 guys with Carter, Anderson. And I'm putting D-line and edge together here. Taking Will Anderson, Jalen Carter, and Tyree Wilson. Those are like your 3, okay, tier 1 guys you shouldn't miss on. After that, you got the Breesys, you got the Keon Whites, you've got the Lucas Van Ness, the Kalijah Kanseys. That's where it's a little bit more iffy. That being said, I love Kancey, and like I texted you the day he tested, I was like, my God, if he's – it was an instant reaction, overreaction type of thing where I was like, if you trade back to 7, 8, or 9, that's who I want the pick to be. I've slowed on that a little bit, but at the same time, if it happened, I wouldn't be mad. It's kind of like how I felt with Tyree Wilson at 3 2 weeks ago. So there's picks there, and that's the thing. You've got time if you're Ozone for it, but you also don't really have time because something I'll discuss this coming week is how you've got Kyler Murray coming up on his big contract, and you don't want to just pay him all that money to just not have a team around him. So
yeah, and like
they're in a very tough spot is what we're getting at.
So you look at Kyler's cap hits, I think it's like 16 or 17 million, somewhere around there this year. And then it just jumps. The contract extension finally kicks in and it skyrockets to the moon in 2024. I mean, he's already out, we're assuming halfway And that's an assumption right there.
I've been on the boat. I don't think he plays next year.
I mean, dude, so even dude, that's perfect. Let's roll with that. Let's say Kyler does not play in 2023 for whatever reason, because to support that argument, Jonathan Gannon, the new head coach, and Monty Ossenfort, the new general manager, have been very insistent that they are not going to rush Kyler back. They are not going to rush him back. They're going to give him as much time as they need. And both you and I have gone back and forth on this and how that's probably the smart thing to do if you're investing so much money into him. So 2023 might be a punt it year. Are you more willing to take building blocks in this year's draft, maybe more so projects, if you know 2024 is really the year where they need to show up?
And that's the thing where we've talked about that and I've written about it is if it's going to be a punt year, perfect time to take projects because they're going to take a year or two to build up anyway. Kyler's probably not going to be great. Say he misses 2023, comes back preseason of 2024. He's going to take some time to bounce back and after not playing in a game for so long. Look at Deshaun Watson and what his whole season was. And he wasn't even coming back from an ACL. He was just coming back from all the stuff that made him miss the year. And add in that complication, I think building pieces around him, and that's why trading back makes so much sense, is because you could do the projects this year, and then you could get more of like the guaranteed guys next year, or who you see as the guaranteed guys. Obviously, there's no perfect math to this, but yeah, I mean, other than that, like you've got to have a serious conversation that if you're not going to build this team up, like you've got your quarterback, and like this team's they're building it backwards, whereas most teams, look at the Eagles, built everything around Jalen Hurts. Obviously, they had Carson Wentz before, but they went all in on Hurts, built all the positions around him while he's on a rookie contract. That's the time to do it because then you aren't going to have to pay him. Look at what Buffalo's doing now with Josh Allen, the way Kansas City did with Pat Mahomes. That's your normal way of doing things.
Yep.
So this is a bit different. And it's not Ozenfort's fault. It's Steve Keim's fault, which is really true at this point because his contracts are very interesting. So looking at this Kyler contract, it's not horrible outside of the fact of throw out the random scenario they want to move on next year. He has $81 million in dead cap. So that's not happening. But the point is, it's a different process than any other team has done at this point. So I think you have to be open to different scenarios where you might just have to punt for a year, like you said, and it might make not be the most fan-friendly thing, and that's not something I think Bidwell would want to do or even think about. But same with Ozenfort and Gannon, like they want to win, especially with Gannon having something to prove after that Super Bowl. But I mean, if you're playing blackjack, you can't always get an ace and a jack. You're going to get a 2 and a 4 every once in a while, and you're going to have to say, hit me. And then you're going to have to wait for the next card to come out.
Yep. So been there, done that. I think I'm responsible for keeping the lights on in Vegas a couple of nights playing blackjack.
Yeah, so I think that's where you're at. But
I don't think I could have said it any better, my man. And any closing thoughts on the whole Jalen Carter to the Arizona traction? I mean, I think we already established that if you're Ossenfort, you're probably not going to make him your first pick, at least at number 3. But if you move back, if he's still sitting on the board somehow, I don't think anybody could blame you for taking him in the bottom half of the top 10.
Yeah, if you trade back and you're still in the top 10 and he's there, I think you say F it and take him.
Yeah. Absolutely. All right. For Andrew Harbaugh, I am Donnie Druin. Thank you so much for tuning in to another edition of the All Cardinals podcast. Go and follow Andrew on Twitter at @AndrewHarbaugh_. Follow me on Twitter at Donnie Druin. Thank you so much. Don't forget to comment, like, subscribe, all of that good stuff. We will be back next week. Until then, we'll see you.